Hello, my name is Ronald Kinard, and this evening I will be presenting to you an action RTS, emphasis on the action. So, an action RTS, and we have a lot of those in the market already, kind of like MOBAs. Well, I don't feel MOBAs have enough action. You know, they're often called action RTSs, but they're not really action-y. They're highly competitive, and I definitely see that. They have a lot of kind of hotkey gameplay. It's not a whole lot of involvement. You need to be exhilarating and skill-based with your action to, be action. So, what kind of action are we talking about here? I really like what are affectionately called bullet hell or curtain fire games. There's bullets everywhere, and it's entirely based on if you can dodge the bullets and shoot at the same time. And dodging arguably is more important because if you don't dodge, then you lose very quickly. But bullet hells by themselves aren't wholly competitive games. I mean, if you were to put two players in a bullet hell environment shooting at each other, that's all they're doing. So let's add, DS aspects. The most important part of this design is that there are two major scopes: the action and the strategy, the real-time strategy. So, a couple games that inspire me into this design are Realm of the Mad God, which is a permadeath bullet hell MMORPG. It's a bit of a tongue twister. In that game, there's a lot of risk involved with losing and not dodging correctly, in which you lose all of your progress and all of your items. Also, a Quake 3 mod called Tremulous, which adds a bit of the strategy aspect to the first-person shooter and really focuses on the idea of a team having territory on the map that they're trying to keep control of. So let's talk about the gameplay. So the main goal of this game, much as in a MOBA game, is to destroy the enemy headquarters. You have two teams of equal sizes, fighting across different parts of the map to eventually destroy the other base. How do you do that? You need to capture resources that are located across the map. With those resources, you make items, weapons, and buildings, and you use those weapons, items, and of course buildings to kill the enemy and defend your own stuff. When a person dies, they drop their weapon and items. And so there's a very inherent team-wide risk of death, because the other team can end up taking your stuff, and then they are having a snowball effect to eventually topple you with their advantage while you're weak. So making stuff is part of the strategy, and actually a very core component of the strategy of this game. Of course, you can make weapons, items, and buildings. Weapons have different bullet patterns and different effects that the other team has to account for when they're moving around and dodging things. Items are consumables that give you things like teleporting to buildings that you have placed on the map, or stat boosts, things like that. You also have outposts, turrets, gathering buildings, which allow you to secure your territory and continue gathering the resources you need to build the weapons that you want to topple the player's team. Other team, obviously. Everything requires a different selection of resources, so one weapon may require like wood and metal or something like that, and the other weapon may require a completely different set of resources and different amount of resources. So the resources that you have control what you're able to make and what strategies you can build. The basic controls, you have WAS and D to move around like a first-person shooter these days. Left click on the screen to shoot in that direction or deploy a targeted thing like a bomb, grenade, something like that. Tower of Flame, I don't know. And you can interact and build with the right mouse button as sort of a context-sensitive radial dial, much like EVE Online, where if you click on, let's say, a resource node that's not gathered, you can put a gathering node on it. The aesthetic, again, Realm of the Mad God. Bullets and players, and this is actually part of the whole aesthetic design, is they need to be really simple and clear. You need the players to be, or you need the things in the game to be easily communicated to the player at a glance. You don't want to have them remember that, oh, that's a bad thing. So all of the bullets from one team will be of that team's color. And so those bullets aren't going to hurt me. The other team's bullets are, and probably will kill me if I don't move out of the way. And also, player silhouettes need to be really, really clear against the background. And going with that, we're going to have a semi-futuristic kind of game world where the game world is natural, kind of a forest jungly environment, like a MOBA game, and the player presence is artificial and metallic, you know, very sharp edges and things like that in their structure and design. So let's talk about marketing. My demographic, I don't want to single out any age group and say, you can't play this game, this isn't for you, because I've been beaten by 12-year-olds in StarCraft. Plenty of strong, smart players in every age group. But I want to target groups of friends and competitive friends that want to play together and beat other teams. It would encourage people to play together through the team support, through our website, you know, have team logos in the game, put them on the ground, on flags, things like that. Also want to have a reduced barrier of entry, making it free to play so that as many people can get in and try the game and see if they like it, you know, get into a team of people that they like to play with and play competitively. Want the game to look good enough and pretty enough to be appealing to an audience that's watching the game, but also fast enough to run anywhere. Obviously to widen the audience. You don't want to limit the game to high-end systems because only high-end systems can play the game at that point. It's not really a good thing. Even mid-end systems should be able to stream on Twitch to share the game with whoever wants to watch. So advertising campaign, I really want to work with popular streamers and YouTube channels to give out beta keys and swag and things like that to kind of get publicity going around, maybe a little bit of viral campaigning too. Also run a development blog, kind of like Final Fantasy's Letter from the Producer, in which the developers of the game actively communicate with the players what they're doing. The reason for this is that because it's a competitive game, players really need to be involved with the development. They need to be able to communicate, oh, this tool that we're using just doesn't feel good to use, things like that. That we can, you know, change it over time and make it really grow. For the initial development cycle, I want to only support PC to reduce development costs, not ruling out the potential for other consoles in the future. And build the game on the Unity engine to give us a very quick basis so we can rapidly iterate over ideas. We could also build a web browser target where you can play the game in a web browser, and also we automatically support all 3 major desktop platforms. So team estimation, really strong balance designer. This is core to an esport. If there is a balance problem that the players end up exposing and abusing, we need to be able to quickly find a way to fix that. And I think a good balance designer would be able to solve those situations quickly. Obviously, an artist and a sound engineer to deal with the aesthetic. Marketing expert. Marketing is very important to getting people interested in watching the game, or playing it for that matter. We need, because I'm coming from a programming background, I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth with the programmers. We need a back-end engineer that's going to do the matchmaking service and the database, game client and server, that person be working in Unity, and a web engineer to build the front-end website where they can, you know, look up teams and see rankings and stuff like that. For a 1-year development cycle, I'm thinking about $800,000, maybe a little bit more, to include advertising costs and things like that. So, any questions?
Let's say a balance designer.
Balance designer is somebody who actively plays the game with the community and decides whether or not issues are actually a problem as they're communicated to them from the community. They'll try out every weapon and every situation to make sure, oh, maybe this thing is too powerful, we need to make it a little bit weaker, maybe have a little bit less of an AoE, things like that.
Now, from the sound of it, this could be as simple as something like Missile Command, or it could go all the way to somewhere like The Last of Us. You could kind of swing it both ways from this pitch. Where do you see yourself in this one, in between those two extremes?
I'm leaning towards simplicity because iteration in the development cycle would take up a lot of time to make sure that different ideas in the game work well. And if they don't work well in play testing, we can change them and just spend a lot of time developing on that. So building the base game can take a short amount of time if it's simple, but at the same time we can spend a lot of time fixing issues and improving the game.
So you have a really good advertising strategy. That's interesting that you want to actually make the development exposed to the clients or to the core demographics there. Are you doing something like Kickstarter or anything like that to help fund or help bring out more awareness of your products?
Yes, a Kickstarter would allow us to spread out beta keys to anybody who's really interested in giving it a shot before anybody else even. Alpha testing, let them have more of an ability to talk about the game internally and give ideas of how they think they would improve it. Because once you get it out in the wild, there's so much more of an audience. It's hard to filter out the noise to get real issues that you need to work on.
I didn't hear your Kickstarter answer. What would your Kickstarter answer?
Yes.
So you want to do Kickstarter?
I would like to use Kickstarter to help support, not fully fund the game. There needs to be funding.
How much would you ask for Kickstarter?
Probably about $200,000 to bump it up to a total of $1 million in order to support maybe getting like a MLG or something like that on board to run tournaments for us, something like that, for 1 year or whatever, 1 season.
So let's go back to the actual gameplay itself. You're saying it's a mixture of MOBA with bullet hell mechanics, correct? Where do the bullet hell mechanics come in? Like you're saying you have a weapon that shoots out different gun patterns that fire forward. But how is that any different than any other MOBA where you're attacking somebody from range? Like where is that, especially if it's in a 3D environment, correct? Where you're trying to have a behind person perspective where you have the WASD type control scheme. So we're looking at a third person or first person shooter type control scheme, correct?
No, I'm sorry, I must not have communicated that well. Because it's a bullet hell sort of game, it's going to have a top-down perspective, meaning you can move in any direction from your perspective and you can shoot in any direction.
So exactly like
so there's
Realm of the Mad
no
God.
depth. Yeah, like Realm of the Mad God. To differentiate it from MOBA, there are skills in MOBA games that they call skill shots. Shooting in this game will basically be a skill shot. You would have to aim it correctly or adjust your bullet pattern by changing the aiming direction so that you can trick the other player into falling into a path of bullets so that they die. Also, the other player has to know and kind of think about what you're going to do when you're aiming your shots in order to dodge them correctly.
I also make the comment that there's less text, but the more visual, the better it is for the audience to understand what you're trying to convey.
Yeah.
It's only in academia where we put up all that text that bores everybody. In the real world, they like to have a lot of visuals because nobody reads after they get out of college.
No long emails. Even when the designers give you stuff, it's usually big, ugly drawings that you just kind of look at and understand instead of reading documents.
We have about 2 more minutes for questions.
At what point are you planning on doing this Kickstarter during your development?
About a month to 2 months after the development starts, so that we can have a base game for people to alpha test once they pay into the Kickstarter.
How many people on each side? Like, what is the typical matchup going to look like?
I'm thinking 8 players. That way you can evenly split it between attackers and defenders.
And is this like a traditional MOBA where you have certain paths and you have creeps and everything like that? Or is this more of like player versus player type battles?
Specifically player versus player.
So how are they supposed to get the resources to build out their base building stuff, and who determines who's building what where, and is it like a shared pool amongst the team or is it individual? Like how does that whole mechanic work?
Okay, so resources will be shared amongst the whole team because buildings will not necessarily, the gathering buildings will not be identified by the player that owns it, just the team that owns it. Any of the players can decide to build something, but you have to communicate with your team how you want to spend your initial resources in order to build those gathering buildings. Each resource spot on the map is a different resource, so you need to decide, okay, what do we need to fulfill our strategy?
Can you build anywhere?
You can build anything except gathering stuff anywhere.
So who's stopping somebody from building a wall of just things destroying things right in front of them in a little path?
Siege weapons.
Okay.
So those.
So yeah, having an explanation of what different things, or maybe something that gives an idea of what you can build, what you can't build. Would be also helpful to find out if it's kind of balanced, if there's a way to mitigate things. So, but I mean, still overall, it's a really good. Actually, I like this concept. It's pretty good.
Thank you.
All right, we have time for one more question.
I'm good.
Okay, thank you.